Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Michael Burke with Interdyne BMI. I just want to thank you all for attending the webinar today, Paperless Warehousing. Your presenter today is Mark Hamblin from Dynamic Manufacturing Solutions, and we're happy to have him here to spotlight one of their solutions. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the chat feature or the raised hand icon on your dashboard located to the right-hand side of your screen. There's also going to be some time for Q&A with Mark at the end of today's webinar, and we'll be answering all the questions submitted then.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're, as Michael said, we're going to go through and review paperless warehousing, or more specifically, using automated shop floor data collection to help eliminate paper, help eliminate inefficiencies. Before we do that, a little bit on the educational series from Interdyne.
Yep, thank you very much for joining today. My name is AJ Ansari. Most of you know me from our projects that we work together, or pre-sale opportunities. The Let's Talk NAV Educational Series is part of what we're doing with Dynamics NAV Outreach. You've probably heard of our letstalknav.com blog, where we post tips and tricks around Dynamics NAV. And last year we decided to complement that with some videos on how to. We've started doing monthly webinars. Some of these webinars are on Dynamics NAV functionality and training driven, and some are spotlights on excellent products, much like what Mark is going to present today from DMS. I want to point out that the next event that we're going to do is going to be in the month of June. We're actually going to have an event on what's new in Dynamics NAV 2015, and we've secured an excellent speaker in Tom Taylor from Microsoft. Tom Taylor is our partner technology strategist from Microsoft, and he'll be showing some great new features with the product and possibly give you reasons for considering upgrades. In addition to what you're seeing at this session and what you see on our training sessions and our blog, if you're interested in any type of classroom training, whether for yourselves or are interested in part of a joint training effort with other clients of ours, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to make that happen for you. With that, just a quick word of introduction around Mark. We've worked with Mark for many years now, and Mark has an excellent solution that we have recommended to a lot of our clients. In addition to what Mark is showing today, he's also got a really good time collection solution for manufacturing, and that may be something that of interest to you as well. So with that, Mark, it's over to you, and thank you again for making time for us and for our clients today.
Great, thanks, AJ. All right, so let's just go through what we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to spend a few minutes, on a PowerPoint here, just going through why you might consider, doing automated data collection within your warehouse or your shop, and also some of the things to watch out for if you're getting involved in doing a project like this, what you might want to be aware of before you start. And then finally, what you can expect if you actually implement something like this. And then we'll jump directly into the software. So we're going to spend a few minutes, in PowerPoint land here going through some of the details, and then we'll jump into the actual software. And we'll go through both the strictly warehouse and material management side of things, and we'll also touch briefly on the labor collection, in case you do have requirements for that as well. All right, so let's get started. So really, everybody on the call, you're dealing with electronic data. You have NAV, you're feeding data into it somehow, and that's valuable, right? Having that electronic data allows you to do BI and those sorts of things. And and that's why BI is so big, because you've got all of this data, you want to bring it out, you want to analyze it, you want to make it meaningful. But in order to have, to get meaning out of that data, we really need to have an easy and effective way of getting data into that vault so we can extract that value from it. So the way we do that, when we're talking about warehousing and shop operations, is really it's the physical transactions that are the important things to deal with. So, when you were doing receipts, you're writing on a packing slip and handing it in, and somebody's retyping it. If you're doing production, you've got consumption and output, you've got pick instructions in the warehouse, all of those sorts of things, inventory counts. All of those physical transactions where you're physically touching stuff and having to record that in your virtual world, in your electronic system, that's a very inefficient way of doing it, because you've got that duplicate data entry, all of those things that you likely know are causing you issues or are inefficient. And the problem really comes in is when we're trying to do that syncing, right? When we want our virtual world, our NAV virtual model of what's going on in our operations to match what's physically happening out there, right? And the common things are, people losing paper, or misplacing it for a period of time, and just typing in wrong serial numbers or lot numbers or any sort of information, right? And that actually adds a significant cost. So if you haven't ever sat down and thought about it, all of those things can lead to these types of symptoms. So overstock, right? Somebody doesn't record a receipt in time, and you don't think you have stock, so it gets reordered and maybe even expedited. That's going to lower your margins because you're spending a lot of money on freight and those types of things. All of that, those symptoms there that you see and more are often caused by people having to do manual entry and use paper within your operations. So how do we address that? Well, really, barcoding is really the most accessible technology out there. Most of, if you're in distribution and things like that, you may already have most of your product barcoded. If not, it's actually very easy to, get a barcode printer and slap labels on everything. So barcoding is really, the most accessible and mature technology out there. An RFID, which we support as well, is useful in sort of a subset of those cases. So, it's fairly specific use cases where RFID would make sense, but it's a very similar technology to barcoding. And really, what you're able to do with that, of course, is streamline that data acquisition, right, that data capture. But collecting the data is only the start of what you can do with this if you get the right tool. So capturing the data isn't enough, right? So data is not information. So I talked a little earlier about, BI is important. You've got all this data. BI actually turns that raw data into information. It puts some context around it and things like that so that you can actually do some analysis. Knowing you spent $10,000 on freight is meaningless unless you know, okay, well, what percentage of my margin is that, or those types of things. So we want to put some context around that data, and it shouldn't just be for the guys sitting in the office. What about the guys on the shop floor? They scan something to record a transaction. Maybe they're doing a pick. They want to go ahead and scan that, and maybe they get to that particular bin, and the bin is empty. Well, now what do they do? Okay. Well, the idea is we provide them some additional information, some additional context to allow them to make a decision about what to do next. Instead of writing the problem down on the back of their hand, maybe now they can go and find a different bin to pick from, or realize that it's in receiving, or something else, or create a note, or take a picture of that, and start making some decisions on the shop floor as well. Okay, so that shop floor decision support takes us beyond just simple data capture and into sort of a new age of shop floor productivity. And just a couple of examples here. So this is on the labor capture side of it, and you can see, we've got our dispatch list that tells us everything that needs to be done in a specific area, and that's all good. Actually, this gives us a lot of information. We know when it's supposed to start, what needs to be done, all of those sorts of things. But we can actually extend that much further. So decision support would go ahead and give us more information, like, okay, now maybe I can see the bill of materials and the work instructions and some quality and linked documents and all those sorts of things. So what we're doing again is we're taking this information out of the business system and bringing it down to the shop floor so that the guys down there have the tools they need to do their job. So normally when you talk ERP, you're talking about taking what's happening on the shop floor and bringing it up to the top floor for analysis. But you really need to go the other way as well. You need to be able to give the guys on the shop floor the tools they need to make decisions. So that's labor capture. Here's an example on the warehouse management side of it. So this is a pick document. So the first thing is, even just like this, we've got a lot of information about that particular pick. We've got almost as much as what you would see on a piece of paper. If you presented a piece of paper to the guys on the shop floor, it would have the bin, the item, the quantities, descriptions, all of those sorts of things. Well, now we can present that electronically, so you don't necessarily need that piece of paper. But we can go one step beyond that. So let's say on this particular pick, he gets to that bin, it's not there, or the product looks wrong or something else, he can actually do a drill down, go to item inquiry, and actually look up details about that specific item. So, what's it supposed to look like? What are recent transactions? What are the details? Where can I find it? So again, the concept is we're taking information from the ERP system, delivering it to guys on the shop floor so they can make decisions and be more efficient at the point of physical transactions. Okay, that doesn't mean that we can't do very solid data capture as well, but that's kind of a foregone conclusion. If you're doing barcoding, you should be able to do everything you need to do with data capture, and then this takes us, one level beyond that. All right, so that's the software side of it, right? So we've got data capture, we've got decision support tools, workflow tools, that type of stuff built in. The next thing you need to do is kind of figure out what type of hardware you're going to use within this type of engagement. And there's a few different options. If we're talking specifically about shop floor type of activities, the dedicated handhelds are the way to go. So that was in the previous picture and this particular one here. A lot of people ask us about phones and tablets on the shop floor, and they're, tablets are actually not a bad choice. Phones are generally a poor choice for the shop floor. They're just not ergonomic, and they're just not rugged enough, really. They're designed to sort of be two-hand usage. You're swiping here and there. You tend to avoid that for shop floor. And then fixed terminals with wedge scanners. You see that often with shipping stations and that sort of thing, packing stations. But generally, for labor capture, that's a common approach. So if you have guys that need to record time against specific jobs, production orders, fixed asset maintenance, all those sorts of things, you'll typically have fixed terminals where they'll go up and they'll actually scan the traveler or the document they're working on. Okay, and then of course phones, warehouse, not great. For outside the warehouse, so if you have outside sales guys or VMI, vendor managed inventory, that type of stuff, then actually a phone is a very good solution. They likely already have one on them, and there's it doesn't have to be the same sort of capabilities as what you get for a rugged terminal. Right. And then just a quick slide of the different hardware options. So thin clients, mini PCs with no moving parts for the shop floor. There's very good tablet solutions. So Motorola has ruggedized tablets. Panasonic does as well. This is actually an Android phone with a built-in 2D barcode scanner and a keypad. And then, of course, the standard ruggedized, devices for the warehouse. Okay. All right. So, what we've gone through so far is hardware and software, and generally you need a little more time on that, but we're trying to keep the PowerPoint short. But once you've kind of figured out what you need for hardware and software, the next thing you'll want to do is look at your barcode strategy. So normally I would have a couple of slides just on barcode strategy, but really what you want to do is figure out, okay, what type of barcodes do you need? Do you need 1D barcodes or 2D barcodes? And the 2D barcodes are kind of like those QR codes you've probably seen. Slightly different. They're called data matrix for industrial use. And there's advantages to that and disadvantages. So the 1D codes or UPC codes are good if your clients need to be able to scan your product and you're labeling for them. Whether you're supposed to label your product, whether your vendors are labeling your product, all of those sorts of decisions you need to make ahead of time. Then deployment, is it going to be on the cloud, or are you going to be on premises? How are you going to deploy the solution, and getting IT engaged. So especially if we're talking about ruggedized devices or things that they may not have seen, like thin clients, very important to get them engaged up front so they know what's going on. And what's very important with really all of these things, now labor it's a little different because if they're fixed terminals you can have a hardwired terminal, but if you're talking about mobile devices, you're going to have a decent network in your warehouse. All the good systems out there, including ours, are going to be real time. They're going to need that real-time connectivity back to your NAV system in order to execute the workflow, execute the business logic, all of that kind of stuff in real time, versus batching things up and posting them later and then dealing with any issues you find after the physical transaction has occurred. If you're in that sort of batch mode, you're really no further ahead than using a paper-based process to a large extent. Okay. And then, of course, there's processes that you may want to change. So a good example of this is, maybe you'd really like to track serial numbers or lot numbers, but it just doesn't make sense because, you have 10-digit lot numbers. You can't expect people to write those down properly or track them properly. Well, now all of a sudden, if you just have to scan a barcode to capture that information, maybe it makes sense to implement lot or serial tracking, right? Maybe it makes sense to go to the higher level warehouse management capabilities within NAV instead of just using shelf numbers or basic bins. So there's lots of things you can do once you have a better mechanism for capturing that information than what you do with paper. Okay? And then finally, once you've got a barcoding system in place, what can you expect? Well, generally you're going to find things are able to be executed much more quickly and more efficiently. That's really what's happening. The big advantage of the barcoding is accuracy, inventory accuracy. We go back to that concept of matching your physical environment with what NAV thinks is supposed to be there. So your physical and virtual world are a lot more in sync once you're doing this automated data collection. So a couple of little case studies here. The first one, inventory management. So a client basically implemented it strictly to do inventory counts. And normally what they would do in the past, and this may seem familiar, is they did a bunch of pre-counting, they did a bunch of prep work, they did the actual physical inventory, and then they did the recounts and the reconciliation. And that was typically a 2-week process from start to finish. With a barcoded solution, they still did some of the pre-counts, but they're able to knock the counting time down to about a day. So they shaved over a week off their actual count time. So they went from almost 2 weeks down to a week or less. And that effectively paid for the system in one count. Because if you think, I've got 10 people counting and a bunch of people doing reconciliation and data entry, that's a lot of labor hours, to spend a week doing. By bringing that down, again, the system paid for itself in one physical inventory count. The other one, this is more labor tracking, but the shop floor data collection can do, consumption, output, labor, all of those sorts of things. And really, what they did was 400 employees, all tracking their time, basically knocked out the equivalent of 2 full-time people doing data entry and payroll and everything else, and the system really paid for itself in 6 months or less. So those are the types of things you can see, the benefits you can see once you pull out that whole paper-based process and go, more automated and more electronic data collection. If you have any questions about this, again, just put them in the question box or ask me after we're done. But what we're going to do now is switch over to the more interesting part of it, and not so much me blabbing, and we can actually see some of the software in action. So I'm just going to flip the screen. AJ or Michael, if you don't see that properly, just let me know and we can address it. But otherwise, hopefully, what you see is a fancy handheld scanner on the screen right now. Now, what you actually see on the screen is an exact copy of what I'm actually holding in my hand. So I have this specific data logic scanner in my hand, and I'm going to tap the screen, and I'm going to scan barcodes and everything else, and we're going to see things happen. We run data logic for these demos, but we support Intermec, Motor, any of the guys out there we can run the app on. Okay? But data logic is the one where, if you're buying a bundle with hardware and software, data logic is typically the one we're going to recommend and include. It's currently, probably the best value out there. Okay, at any rate, let's have a look at what the software does. So there's a whole bunch of different modules within there. There's about 20 different modules available in the warehouse management software, and including production, so it's consumption and output. But the basics are, we've got an inventory inquiry mode where you can scan a barcode and it tells you what it is. And that's available from any of the screens within the system. So again, if I'm doing a pick or if I'm doing a receipt, I can do that inventory inquiry, and it's available independently on the menu. And these menus are configurable, by the way. You can make it look however you want. Shipping and receiving, fairly straightforward. The nice thing about this is we support any warehouse configuration in NAV. So if you have warehouse receipts turned on, no problem. When you load up receiving, that'll bring up a warehouse receipt. If you don't have them turned on, it'll bring up a purchase order or a transfer order or whatever else you're receiving against. Similarly with shipping, if you have warehouse shipments turned on, we'll bring up the warehouse shipment. Otherwise, it'll bring up the sales order or the transfer order or whatever else you're actually shipping. Okay? So regardless of your NAV configuration, the system will just read what it is and adapt accordingly. And that includes everything from no bins enabled at all the way up to the full-blown WMS and NAV. Okay, so you can extend any configuration that you currently have using the software. Picking and put away, again, depending on the NAV configuration, these will either be disabled, it'll bring up an inventory pick and inventory put away, or it'll bring up a warehouse pick and warehouse put away. Okay. On the movement side, this does a few things. Number one, we can of course move between bins in a single location. We can also move from one location to another. So instead of having to do a transfer order, we can dynamically scan, an item in one location and automatically move it to another location without having to go to NAV and doing anything. It can be done directly from the handheld. Production, I mentioned, that's consumption and output, with a few definite advantages over base NAV, especially when it comes to tracking serial numbers and lot numbers for consumption versus output. So it does extend the basic NAV stuff a fair amount. And then license plating is a bit of an advanced module. What that allows us to do is build up pallets of product or packages of product. So that's mixed product or mixed serial numbers, mixed lot numbers, any of those sorts of things. And then we get a single barcode we can scan to manipulate that entire pallet. So it allows me, for example, as I'm receiving, to build up a pallet, have a barcode on it, either a pre-generated barcode that's always attached to that pallet, or I can generate a new barcode every time. And then I can scan that barcode to put that product away or to transfer it to another facility or to ship it to a customer or whatever I want. So that's on the receiving side. On the shipping side, as I'm picking, I can actually build up packages, and then when I actually perform that shipment, I know how many packages I've sent and what's in each individual package. Okay. Scratchpad is for offline, so I mentioned that everything here is online, but if you are in a situation where something goes down, network goes down, or if you're off-site and need to do a count or something like that, you can scan everything into Scratchpad, and then when you're back in range of your network, you can upload that to NAV and then process it from within NAV. So it does have that offline mode if required. Okay. And the last one, very important, is the inventory count functionality. So it allows us to do both a basic count and an advanced count. The advanced count does a lot of things beyond what standard NAV does. So if you've done inventory counts in NAV using the physical inventory journal, you probably already know what a pain that is. And this eliminates all of the, those pain points. It allows us to define inventory count cards, so we see a history of all our inventory counts. It allows us very granular control over how we execute that count. And the most important things is it provides us the reconciliation tools and the recounting tools we need to be able to effectively execute the auditing and the recounts after we've done the initial count. So that's the big time saver there. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. All right, so let's actually have a look at the software. I'll jump into inventory inquiry, and you'll see here I can actually scan a barcode, or I could manually type something in. And the reason we have the ability to manually type something in here is, let's say I find a damaged barcode, I could actually type in that item number and then print a barcode directly from the handheld device to affix to that product if I want. But generally what people are going to do here is they're going to scan. Now the whole point of this app, this module, is they scan a barcode and it tells them what it is. Okay, so it's not often going to be used on its own. It's normally going to be used as the end result of a drill down from a document. But if I was to use a standalone, I could go up and I could scan a barcode. So I just scan a barcode, and the first time I scan, it's going to reconnect to the network and take a sec to show up. So it's the device was sleeping off the network for a sec. And incidentally, I'm running this off the cloud. So what I'm connected to is actually a virtual machine that's running on the cloud, and I'm connecting remotely from my office here. And it could very well be that the network is slow. Okay, so there we go. It brought it up. and normally it's much quicker. So here's this LS150 that I just scanned. I'm just going to scan a different item so you can see the effective time it actually takes to bring information up. So I'm going to scan a separate barcode here. And notice I don't have to actually go back and choose an edit box to scan into or anything else. I scan a barcode, the system knows what I'm trying to do and reacts accordingly. So I just scanned a separate barcode, and it takes, normally it's pretty much instant. The network might be a little slow. That took about half a second to come up with the information for this other barcode I scanned. Now, this particular location that I'm connected to in NAV does have bins enabled. And so it shows me, okay, I scanned this particular item, I have 28 in stock, and then below it lists everywhere I can find that particular item, all the bins. Now these columns are all configurable. So for example, if I'm tracking serial numbers or lot numbers by bin, I could actually have that broken out. So I could show the lot numbers and serial numbers there. If I'm doing variant codes and I'm tracking the variant codes by bin, I could see the variant codes here as well. So really you can tailor that to, sort of however you want it to look. Some of the other things on here, so I've got, recent transactions. What some people do here is we set this up as showing supply demand. Instead of recent transactions, we see how many are on sales orders, how many are on purchase orders, that sort of thing, to help the guys, again, make some of those decisions on the shop floor. And then finally, we're also able to bring in a picture of the item. This will load it in from NAV, or you can just have it cached locally on the device, so you could upload all your pictures to the device, and it'll bring them up. And the advantage of that is when I'm doing a pick or a receipt or something like that, I can have this optionally pop up for a second or two or whatever time frame I specify, so that we get that visual verification of what they're picking. So that's great if you have temporary workforce, or you guys are a little more junior on the shop floor. They scan, they get an immediate visual verification that what they're holding in their hand is actually what they're supposed to be holding. Okay. Down here we've got a menu. We can assign F keys to this, so that I can hit F1 or F5 for print as an example everywhere in the system. And you can add your own menus to this as well. So for example, if I wanted 4 print buttons for different types of documents to print from here, I could do that. By default, there's the report selections, and the default is that this would print an item label report. Right? So this would just print that label directly out of NAV to your label printer, whether that's a wearable printer that the guys are carrying around with them, or it's a fixed printer somewhere in the warehouse. That's all configurable. Okay. The other thing I can do from here is I can do a bin inquiry. So if I scan a bin barcode, again, I didn't have to back out and say, hey, I need to scan a bin, let me scan a bin now. All I do is I scan the bin barcode, and it brings up all the details about that particular bin. Okay, and I could scan another bin from here as well, and same thing, it goes in and it just brings up that new bin. And so the bin inquiry, basically shows me what I have in that bin, any pallets that I might have stored in that particular bin as well. And again, the menu is configurable. I can do basic inventory adjustments, ad hoc inventory adjustments here, and some other things as well. Okay. All right. So that's the basic inquiry. Now, let's. I'm going to jump into picks real quick, because that's a fairly common process. Everybody typically needs to do a pick. Whether you're picking directly to a sales order, so if you don't have picks enabled, you would pick directly to a sales order, or if you do have picks enabled, like I do in this particular location, it'll bring up a pick document. So from here, I can do a couple of things. We can, if you have a barcode to scan for that particular pick, and that barcode could actually even be on the screen. If we're using those 2D barcodes, I can actually scan directly from the screen onto the handheld. So let's just actually bring an example up, and you get to see what what those 2D barcodes look like, and what a sample pick document could look like. Incidentally, of course, this is NAV 2013 R2, but we support all versions of NAV, technically from NAV 4 and up, though we don't like NAV 4. NAV 5 and up is what we support generally. And there's a 2D barcode. Okay, so that's what the 2D barcode looks like. And I can actually scan that directly off the screen if I want. Or if I wanted to use a piece of paper still as a trigger for the guys on the shop floor, I could do that, and they could have that, so it shows up in their inbox, they scan it, and they start their pick. Alternatively, I can hit this little search box here, and I can bring up all the pick documents in the system. And if I logged into the device, I'm just in there sort of as an anonymous user, but if I logged in, what it would do is show me all the documents that are specifically assigned to me as well. Okay, so those would show first, followed by all the others. And what I can do from here is just grab one of the documents and bring it up. So I grabbed a specific pick, it's going to load it up, and that's going to show me everything that's on that pick document in NAV. Okay, so it's not the same pick as the one I had on the report there. This is a larger pick. And what it does is, again, shows me the item, the bin, the quantity, the unit of measure. All of these columns are configurable. So again, if you had variants or anything like that, you know, we would those columns would be visible. If you didn't have bins enabled, you just wouldn't see the bin column. Okay, we can show the shelf number instead, or just leave it blank, depending on how you've got your system set up. And then from here, the operation is I effectively just have to scan the bin and then scan the item to indicate what I'm picking. And the reason we do that is we want that physical verification that, you know, the guy is actually at, you know, the bin that NAV expects him to be at before he picks the product. So we generally force people to scan the bin. That's what this says down here. But that can be overridden. So there's an option that says you don't actually have to scan bins to do your pick. And some people may prefer that. Okay, so what I'll do is, you know, I'm this guy, I bring this up, and I happen to be standing at bin, you know, 0201 here, even though that's the second line in the pick, that's where I'm going to start my pick. So all I do is I scan the bin that I'm in front of. The system automatically knows that I just scanned a bin barcode. It grabs the first line with that particular bin on it, and then lets me scan the item that I need to pick from that bin. So even if this bin appeared multiple times in this pick document, it grabs the first one. When I scan the item, it finds the appropriate line that has that item and bin combination that still has a remaining quantity to pick. So what I'll do now is I'll scan the item that I'm supposed to pick. Okay, so I just scan that. Brings up the picture optionally, so I don't know, that might have been too fast on the webinar for you to see, but I think I have it set up for 1 or 2 seconds. It pops up the picture, and then finally I enter the quantity that I'm actually picking for that particular item. Okay, and then what it does, you can see the quantity I've taken is 2, and this is the quantity remaining is decremented down to 2 as well. And that's real time with NAV. So if I open up this particular pick document in NAV, we'll actually see that happening in real time. So that's already happened in NAV. So if I have custom business logic in NAV that, you know, does something unusual when I set that quantity, that'll get executed automatically. Okay. Now let's say that, you know, I went to this bin, I tried to pick it, I couldn't. I'm supposed to pick, you know, an additional 2 out of there, but that bin happens to be empty. What do I do now? This is where that decision support stuff comes in. So I've actually set up to F8. If I hit F8 on the keypad, it'll bring up inventory inquiry, or I can just tap the screen to show it a little more visually. I can come in, hit item inquiry, and it'll actually drill down to that particular item and show me where else I might be able to find it. Or if I want to look at the picture again, or the recent transactions or whatever I want, I now have this information at my fingertips to help me make decisions about how I'm going to finish executing this particular pick. Okay, and let's say that, you know, at that point I realize that there is a problem, or maybe these 2 are damaged or something like that. The next step I might want to do is notify the warehouse supervisor that something's gone wrong. The device I have doesn't actually have a camera on it, but these actually do now come with cameras. So I could actually take a photo of that, maybe it's damaged product, take a photo of it, and it'll automatically go and attach itself into NAV against this document and send a notification to my supervisor, whoever that is, with that picture. Okay. Same thing with a voice note. I could record a voice note and then send that in, and that'll automatically attach as well. Okay. On this particular one, what I've got is I've got text notes because I don't have a voice recorder or a camera on this device. So what I can do is I can hit add note. So I want to let my supervisor know that something's gone wrong, and I've got some standard text code set up in NAV, so just the standard NAV, you know, shortcut text stuff. and I've got one called BE for bin empty, and I can type in, you know, whatever text I want, you know, like that, whatever I like, and BE is a standard text code. It's going to expand out to something, text that says bin empty. So when I do that, all that does is just send a notification to my supervisor that something's gone wrong. And again, that could be a photo, it could be a voice note, or it could be a text note like this. And what that looks like, if we go back into NAV, there's the note I just created, and if I click on that, we can actually load up that particular document. Okay, and there's that line where, you know, we have the quantity I've handled is 2, and we've got, you know, 2 remaining out of the 4. Okay, so, you know, it gives you that two-way communication, you know, with the guys in the office as well. Okay, so that's the basics. Now, the other things we can do here, I mentioned license plating. So if I want to actually build up packages as I'm picking, so that's the pick and pack, I can do that from here. I can create a package, I can fill it up, I can start a new package after that, and then when I ship it, I've got the weights, the quantities, the contents of each package that I'm shipping. Okay. This print, again, it's report selection, so I could have print anything. I could have print labels for the current line I'm on. I could have it reprint the pick document. I could have it do whatever I like. And then a few other things here, you know, basic NAV stuff. If I have lot numbers, or if I need to split a line, so if I have to pick it, you know, this item out of multiple bins, I can split those. I can change bins. I can do all the things that you know may need to do in the warehouse environment. And then finally, I can also post this document. So whether it's a sales order transfer, purchase receipt, whatever, I can actually post from the handheld devices. And that's great on shipping, where, you know, I can scan everything I need in to ship. I can hit post, and it can actually print out all the shipping documentation, everything else, to the printer that's sitting beside me without me having to go into the office, go into NAV, find the document, print it, all that sort of thing. I've already got the document up on the screen. I hit post on the handheld device, and everything just happens magically. Okay, so that posting is actually really nice on the shipping side. And of course, it works on receiving and everything else. All right. Now the other screens are basically the same. So for example, if I go into receiving, it's the same basic idea. I can do a lookup, and this is a directed pick and put away warehouse. So I've got, it lists all the warehouse receipts for me, as well as all the transfer orders and purchase orders and everything else I have in the system. So if I grab a purchase order and there's no warehouse receipt for it, or if there is an associated warehouse receipt, it'll actually bring up that receipt document for that particular PO. Okay, so that's a nice thing. You don't actually have to create your warehouse receipts ahead of time. It'll auto-create once the guy, you know, says that that particular PO has come in. And here it's pretty straightforward. Again, I can just scan the item and enter the quantity. If you do have lot tracking and everything like that enabled, it fully supports that, including lot information. So if you're forced to enter lot information when you're doing receipts, you know, it'll handle that as well. So as an example, I'll just scan in, you know, something I'm receiving. Shows me the picture. The particular barcode I scanned had the lot number in it, so it automatically brings that lot number in. Otherwise, it'll either auto-generate the lot number for me, depending on your configuration, or I'd have to specify, manually specify the lot number here if I didn't have a barcode for that lot number. And then I just enter the quantity that I'm receiving, hit enter, and in this particular case, I've already got lot information on that particular lot number, but if we hit that quantity button, it'll show us all the lots that we've received against that particular line so far, so very similar to the NAV screen for item tracking. And as I mentioned, we can also capture the lot information, serial information at time of receipt, or really any time it's required by the system. Okay, and any custom fields you add will automatically show up in the lot information card here on the handheld device. Okay, so that's basically receiving, pretty straightforward. You know, as they're pulling things out of the boxes or the containers, they scan, they enter the quantity they found, and it just decrements, you know, what's left and increments the quantity to receive. So the nice thing about that is, you know, they don't have to pull everything out, put it into individual piles, and then count the quantities all at once. They just, as things are coming out, they scan the barcode, enter the quantity that they've got in their hand at that particular time, and it'll, you know, basically increment the total quantity they found so far. So it makes it very easy to do receipts from the handheld device. The final thing I'll show you on this for now is the inventory count function. So I just jumped into inventory count, and from the handheld, what I'll do is I'll do a lookup for a count sheet. An account sheet is similar, if you're used to the physical inventory journal, is similar to a batch, but it's a little different. So a count sheet is, configured, has a unique configuration, and generally you have one count sheet for, each team of people doing a count. An account sheet could be 100 pages long if you're doing a paper-based count, so that it supports both paper-based and barcoded inventory counts, or a mixed mode. So you could have some people scanning barcodes and other people doing handwritten counts as well on the same inventory count. But generally, what you'll do is, I'm on team 1, so I'm going to bring up that count sheet, and I may have scanned things into this previously. Yeah, so this one actually is a cycle count, so it's showing me cycle count for this particular item. And in the case of a cycle count, these are the instructions that I have. It's telling me to go to this bin, count this particular item, and enter the quantity. And that's what I do. I basically scan that bin, scan that item, and enter the quantity associated with it. Okay, so I scan the bin, scan the item, and then it asks me for the quantity that I'm counting, and that's basically it. And that's how I would execute a cycle count. The cycle count, what you need to count, is actually generated from NAV using your inventory account period codes, or usage information, or a whole bunch of different criteria that you can specify. And then on the handheld, they scan the bin, they scan the item, and it can be done in any order, right? So I could scan any bin I want and enter the quantity. In the case of a full inventory count, so if you're doing a full physical count, you generally won't have instructions on what they need to count. You're going to tell them, you go down aisle A and scan everything you find. So if I do that, I'll just bring up this count sheet. This one I've already scanned once, but the instruction would be to the shop guy, okay, you go down this aisle and just scan everything you find. So that's exactly what he'll do. He'll walk through, he'll scan a bin that he's in front of, he'll scan whatever items he finds in that particular bin, he'll enter the quantity for that item, so 14, and then he'll move on to the next bin, or the next item in that particular bin. And that's how you do your inventory count. You walk down the aisle, you scan everything you find. Then within NAV, there's an entire module dedicated to allowing you to reconcile that count. So this is the one I was actually just scanning into. Right? So here's that team 4. I got 2 lines on it. And here's that second line I just scanned. There's this whole module that's dedicated to helping you figure out what wasn't counted, what was extra, what serial numbers were missed, what lot numbers were missed. And if you do lot number and serial number tracking, it'll actually make the lot and serial number adjustments for you, unlike standard NAV. So base NAV just doesn't do that at all. This tool will look after all your lot and serial number issues for you automatically. Okay? So that's the NAV sort of matching component to what you actually see on the handheld device. Okay, so the handheld, they just go really easy, scan bin, item, enter quantity, and they walk through the warehouse and very quick, and they're done. Within NAV, the account manager would come in, he'd run the difference analysis, he might generate some recount sheets to send the guys out to do recounts on, and your count time gets knocked in half by using that. All right. Normally I would have paused many times by now for questions in the middle, so it seems like I'm droning on and on and on, but I'll keep going. So that's basically the functionality. Of course, there is more, a lot more in here that you can do, but that gives you a flavor for some of the key components of the interface on the shop floor. There's a lot of things within NAV that you can configure, so depending on how you want the thing to work, there's a whole bunch of different configurations and things like that you can turn on and turn off, so that ideally there's very little customization required, if any, to match your current processes. There's a lot of checkboxes and options you can turn on and off to get the system to behave the way you want, sort of out of the box. All right. The last thing I'll touch on for just a few minutes is the labor collection side of it. So this is predominantly, again, for inventory management types of things, so material management. There is some basic capability for capturing time from within the production module. But generally, if you want to do more robust labor tracking, you're going to do it on a tablet. You're going to do it on a fixed terminal because you need a little bit more real estate on the screen. So that's what we see here. So what this runs in a web browser. So this is just running in Chrome at this point. And so this can run on a tablet as well. And this is for allowing users to log activities within the shop floor. Okay, so generally that's going to be labor-based stuff. But I can also do consumption, output, those types of things. But effectively, anytime you need to capture time against an activity, this would be a tool that you could use. And I'll just jump in real quick and give you an example of how that would work. So the first step is, an employee would walk up, and incidentally, this does time and attendance as well, and integrates with payroll. So what it'll do is it'll calculate overtime, it'll calculate shift premiums, it'll even calculate piece count bonuses if you have those types of activities. So it's that whole time and attendance piece as well as capturing activities against specific, or capturing time against specific shop floor activities. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scan my employee badge to indicate that I want to look at my activities that I've recorded for the day. So I scan my badge, and it takes me to my time card by default. So this particular person sees his time card when he clocks in. There's another option for him to see a list of tasks for his specific work area. So a list of operations at his work center, or if you're using jobs, a list of tasks. Okay. And what he sees here is his time card. He's recorded no activities today at all. So the next thing he would do is, scan an activity to work on. Now this assumes that you actually are using, shop floor traveler out on the shop floor, which is pretty typical. But we can work completely paperless as well, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. So if you have touch screens out there, you actually don't even need to put paper out on the shop floor. You can have everybody work directly off a touch screen terminal, or just a mouse keyboard if you prefer that. But in this case, he's got a shop floor traveler. He's going to scan the barcode on the shop floor traveler, and he does that. And what it does is it brings up all the details about that particular production order. And we support production orders, jobs, fixed assets, non-productive time, service orders, all within the same interface. So here he scanned a single barcode. It tells him everything everything about that operation that he clocked into. Over here we have the bill of materials, work instructions associated with that operation, and then he can optionally go in and look at additional information. So for example, I can capture quality against this specific operation here. So we can actually not only just show what the tolerances and everything should be, or whatever measures you've defined, we can actually record the actuals against those against those measurements. Link documents, so off the item in the production order, directly out of NAV, and any tooling if you want to define any of that as well. Okay, so we can bring all of this stuff in optionally, and the user can see it. We can record consumption and output from the shop floor interface as well. So if you're not using a mobile device, if you have a fixed terminal at the end of a line, then this would be a more appropriate way to do it versus using a mobile device. Okay. And when I clocked into this, as soon as I did that, it started the clock ticking. So I could either manually enter time here against that particular activity, or I could, scan my badge again to sort of lock my terminal, or lock this particular time card, and come back later. And when I come back later and scan my badge, it brings up everything I've got on my time card, and then I can either scan a new activity, and it'll automatically clock off this activity, or I can clock off this activity manually if I like. And it'll automatically calculate the time that I spent on that particular activity. Okay, and my runtime here is in hours, but it could be whatever you like. So that's the basics. And again, we can capture time against non-productive time. And by that I mean, if you've got, if you want to track time against, sorry, I scanned a barcode that I shouldn't have been scanning. track time against sweeping or first aid or toolbox meetings or any of those sorts of things, we can capture that. And we can also capture time against fixed assets and all those other things. Now, if you wanted to go more paperless, the other approach is, and I just scanned a different badge, a different user's badge, and when she clocks in, she sees all the work that's upcoming in her particular area. And all these columns are configurable, by the way. You can add or remove whatever you like. And from here, without even having a piece of paper, she can see all the work that's coming up, and anything that's in front of her, she can say, okay, I'm going to work on, this particular activity. And if it's a touch screen, she would tap that and then tap clock on, or do what I'm doing here, use a mouse and a keyboard, and then she can clock onto that activity. So that's completely paperless. And again, with the linked documents, they can bring up any drawings or anything they need on the screen, and you don't need anything on the shop floor typically to do that. You just need those terminals, cheap Android tablet or cheap old PC that you've got stuck out on the shop floor work just fine. Okay. And then finally on this, there's the, some basic graphical scheduling capability where I can come in and I can see everything that's assigned to my particular areas. In this case, I see all the work centers here. And, it's a nice visual way of seeing things, and I can drag and drop and move things around. So as soon as I do that, it'll reschedule everything that's a predecessor to that. And so I can do some local optimization if I need to on the shop floor for controlling where work is done and reassign it and that type of thing. And again, all of this information that we're scanning, it's live with NAV. I can see that information in NAV anytime, and it integrates with payroll, whatever payroll system you're using, to calculate overtime, all of those sorts of things. So that's the labor portion versus the previous one, which was really mostly material management. So I'm going to stop there. I ran a little long, but that gives us about 5 minutes for any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you for the great presentation, Mark. Yeah, we actually haven't had any questions submitted so far, so we'll just give a few moments. If anyone does have anything, they can fire them in either the chat or the question fields over to the right.
And while we're waiting, we're going to upload a recording of this webinar to our letstalknav.com YouTube channel. So you'll be able to access this or share this with your team members afterwards. If you're looking for a link to that, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Michael Burke at our team. Our email address is written down over here on the screen. Mark's email address is also noted here just below ours. Once again, thank you very much, Mark.
No problem. All right. Thanks, everyone.
We actually, sorry, are you guys still there? We actually got one question submitted real fast.
Okay, sure.
And so it is, how does this require add-ons for NAV? Or sorry, does this require add-ons for NAV?
Yeah, so this is an add-on for NAV. So you would basically purchase this separately, plug it into NAV, and either one of those, the labor or the material, and then it enables that functionality for you. NAV, if you implement the advanced WMS in NAV, which is not a fit for everyone, does give you basic barcoding capability out of the box if you're running 2013 or newer. But it's all sort of text-based. Anyway, if you are running NAV 2013 or newer, that's something you may want to look at. It doesn't require an add-on, but it is fairly limited.
Well, perfect. And if you guys do have any more additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to either Mark, AJ, or myself, or even your account manager or executive, and we can contact you from there. On behalf of everyone on Interdyne BMI and Dynamic Manufacturing Solutions, we just wanted to thank you for your attendance and have a great rest of your day.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.